1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
They start at 10:15. It's okay. If they delay, then
Check, 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 check.
you know.
Check, 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 check. One, two, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's still a little bit low, and I have it like too high, I think.
Okay, Pat à la console pour Interaction, le son du...
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, 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 check. but I mean,
Any party has a right to speak. If Ukraine speak, you will
the
have
regional?
a.
The
We
regional
don't.
statements?
We understand there's no regional statement by CP.
So what?
So if a party then, of course, we're asking individual parties not to speak, but as you know from the rules, if any party insists on speaking, they can. And then, of course, you would have a right. You're in a difficult position, and we're doing.
And you also know
We're really
that-
pushing hard on the visa.
that when there is a negotiation part,
I know how
you
helpful
know
you
that
are.
they're trying.
You're-
Ladies and gentlemen,
女士们、先生们，请各位就座，我们的会议即将开始。女士们、先生们，请就座，我们的会议即将开始。关吧。
Right. Let's go. Hey, why shouldn't
Start? Okay.
We can start.
Distinguished delegates, please take your seats. Please take your seats. Distinguished delegates, please go back to your seats. Our meeting will start in a minute.
Possible, please. We're about to begin.
Distinguished delegates, I hereby declare open the resumed session of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol, and the 4th meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving the meeting of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol. Now, first of all, I would like to invite you all to a joint plenary session of COP-15, CP-MOP-10 of the Cartagena Protocol, and CP-MOP-04 of the Nagoya Protocol to hear the opening remarks. Distinguished delegates, I hope that you all enjoyed the opening session, the welcome session of the UN Biodiversity Conference yesterday, as well as the evening reception offered by the People's Republic of China. I believe it was an inspiring start. It was a great event last night, and I think it was a good start to our work. Biodiversity is the foundation for human survival and development. The bloodline and roots of a shared future for all life on Earth. However, Earth has lost 100 million hectares of tropical forests and over 85% of its wetlands. And 25% of the species are threatened with the danger of extinction. These changes are shaking the foundation of our sustainable development goals and are undermining our well-being. Humanity stands at a crossroad to protect biodiversity and achieve global sustainable development. We are left with less and less time to realize our biodiversity conservation goals by 2030. In a speech At yesterday afternoon's welcome ceremony, UN Secretary General Guterres issued a stark warning about the continuing widespread loss of plant and animal species, calling it an orgy of destruction of nature, and that humanity is declaring war on nature. This meeting is our chance to move from disharmony to harmony, to stop this orgy of destruction, and to conclude a peace pact with nature. Secretary General Guterres also made a targeted call for governments to develop nation-level cross-sectoral action programs to strengthen the private sector's protection of nature, for developed countries to provide substantial financial support to developing countries, and for financial institutions to ensure that their investments promote the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. I believe that all parties and stakeholders share my urgent desire to reverse the global trend of biodiversity loss and stop the war on nature. As the presidency country of COP-15, China has demonstrated the highest level of political will and leadership to drive the first phase of COP-15 in Kunming to a successful conclusion. For the first time, a leaders' summit was set up and successfully held. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech and proposed a series of pragmatic initiatives. 8 other heads of state or government and the UN Secretary General delivered speeches, injecting strong political impetus into the global biodiversity governance process. The first phase of the meeting also adopted the Kunming Declaration, calling on all parties to contribute their utmost to the development, adoption, and implementation of an effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework, laying a solid political foundation for the second phase of the meeting today. After more than a year of preparation work, we have overcome various difficulties and gathered together again under the theme of ecological civilization, building a shared future for all life on Earth, to jointly plan the strategy and direction of global biodiversity conservation, and to clarify the objectives, set the course, and draw the blueprint for strengthening biodiversity conservation in the upcoming period, which is of great significance. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the host country, Canada, the Bureau members, the Secretariat, the parties, and the stakeholders for their hard work in making this conference a success. Through the joint efforts of the host country, the presidency country, members of the Bureau, and the Secretariat, the relevant agenda and organizational work for the conference are ready, and we have a busy agenda in front of us. On behalf of the presidency country, I would like to sincerely hope that we could see parties, international organizations, and stakeholders demonstrate a spirit of international cooperation, show political resolve and maximum goodwill, and fully demonstrate flexibility, and actively seek compromise on key issues. I encourage parties to make positive political commitments, continue to increase international funding in order to create a conducive conditions to promote the consultation process. I welcome the high-level representatives, including ministers, heads of international organizations and institutions, to focus on solving the difficult issues and forging the greatest consensus so as to provide political momentum to reach the framework document, which is the landmark outcome of the conference. The international community is looking forward to the second phase of COP-15 today. and expects it to reach a post-2020 global biodiversity framework, making COP-15 a crucial moment for reversing global biodiversity loss. Today, this momentous occasion has arrived. Parties and stakeholders have demonstrated strong political will. The world is watching us, and we must get to work as soon as possible. The world is expecting. We are waiting. Let us pool our efforts and our resolve and move forward in the same direction and towards the same goals. Together, we can promote a successful conference and write a new chapter in global biodiversity governance. Respected delegates, now we would like to invite Executive Director of UNEP, Ms. Inger Andersen, to deliver a statement.
Thank you so very much. And to you, Your Excellency, Mr. Huang Rongqi, Minister of Ecology and Environment of China, and of course to my dear sister, Elizabeth Marema, Executive Secretary of the Convention of Biological Diversity, and to all ministers, excellencies, and friends of biodiversity. Let me begin by expressing a huge thanks to China for shepherding and backing the process that has brought us here to Montreal to finalize and ink a deal of huge importance to humanity and to species on this planet, and to Canada for stepping in as a host country of the Secretariat to host us here for the second part of COP-15. My deep thanks to all. Friends, partners, humanity has for centuries treated our greatest ally as an obstacle, a foe, fuel for the profit machine. Biodiversity and by extension humanity is now in trouble. Everyone here knows the situation. The species loss, the historical and ongoing withering of natural landscapes, the degradation of once fertile land and of the ocean. Nature and biodiversity are dying the death of a billion cuts, and humanity is paying the price for betraying our closest friend. In the words of the UN Secretary General, he said, "We are committing suicide by proxy." And the Conference of Parties now must secure the future of our planetary life support system. Nothing less will do. In 12 days, you will need to have concluded the journey that started 4 years ago in Egypt at COP-15. Amongst the heavy, wider agenda for COP, you must now agree on an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework with clear ambitions for the world. The world is watching you. The world is pinning its hope on you. And it's going to take our deepest commitment, our greatest ability to think differently, to remove brackets, a new way of negotiating. If you can do this, you will deliver a framework that faces down the 5 horsemen of the nature apocalypse: changing land and sea use, overexploitation of species, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. You have to agree that a framework that addresses harmful subsidies, misdirected investment, and unsustainable consumption and production, which are the underlying drivers of biodiversity loss. A framework that recognizes and protects the rights of indigenous people and local communities, whom we know are the most effective guardians of biological diversity. A framework that ensures the equitable sharing of the benefits from the use of genetic resources through digital sequencing information and other means. A framework that helps bring nature into our working landscapes, our farms and our cities, transforming these into vibrant green spaces where in the cities our children can play and breathe easy. We must also remember that we are deep in what we refer to as a triple planetary crisis. A crisis of nature and biodiversity loss, yes, but also a crisis of climate change and a crisis of pollution and waste. There can be no healthy nature without a stable climate and vice versa. So the framework must dovetail with the Paris Agreement. It must also dovetail with other agreements, including the Desertification Convention and agreements that we have and arrangements we have made for forests, oceans, and chemicals and pollution, including the global deal to end plastic pollution that is now under negotiation. And for the framework to be delivered, agreement has to be made on sufficient resources. Greater transparency and accountability on progress is essential. Excellencies, we have now been negotiating for a long, long time. Everyone speaks of compromise, but we are not moving fast enough. Let's not lose sight of the point to agree on a framework to support life on Earth. There is no more noble mission, and that mission is yours. Let us move beyond bracketed text to find strong landing space, strong landing place, and move faster. Let us not get lost in the process, but remember the points and the principles, the framework to help safeguard all life on Earth. We all say that there's no time to waste, but our negotiation process has to reflect this, and frankly, it currently does not. Furthermore, we cannot make the mistake of thinking that time is on our side if we succeed here. The only possibility of achieving the 2030 targets is with greater and more urgent action. Immediately after that gavel comes down, governments will need to be set to work across all sectors, across all ministries, and across all departments. And the private sector, civil society, financiers, researchers, academics, indigenous people and local community, all must lend their collective strength to implementing solutions. Food and agriculture systems, the timber industry, the chemicals industry, the buildings and construction industry, and consumers, each and every one of us, all must work with nature in mission and in tow. Excellencies, we cannot live without nature. Nature provides the very essence of life. It also weaves together our very spirit and understanding of culture and history and identity. Indigenous people teach us this. Technology cannot replace trees, the soil, the water, and the species that teem in them. We have no other world to flee to. When the web of life fails, we fall with it. In the coming days, you have a responsibility, a unique responsibility to deliver, to agree on a plan to make peace with nature. This responsibility is not a choice between something or nothing. It is a choice between everything or nothing. We have worked hard for 4 years to get to this point, and I salute you for all this hard work. But time is up. We have to finish our work here. We have to shore up and strengthen that web of life so that it can carry the full weight of humanity for centuries to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, on behalf of UNEP, for your call and for your inspiring remarks. Thank you again. It's now my pleasure to invite Ms. Elizabeth Marema, Executive Secretary of Convention on Biodiversity. The floor is yours.
Distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. Where we are today, Jo, Ja, Gay, or Montreal, has historically been a gathering place for many First Nations. The United Nations Biodiversity Conference takes place with full respect of the continued connections with the past, present, and future with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. This means that our community of people around the world is coming together in a place of dialogue, a place where many voices may be heard. This includes the voices of all stakeholders, including Indigenous peoples and local communities, their youth, their women, and so many more, all of which are critical to our work and to the implementation of the decisions made here over the next 2 weeks. We have waited almost 4 years to come together as the Conference of the Parties or meetings of the parties, and we are finally here because of the tremendous efforts of so many. And here I would like to express my gratitude to our COP-15 presidents, His Excellency Wang Ruichu, and the entire government of China for your tireless efforts. Through the global pandemic, you found a way for us to not only hold the first part of this COP last year, but to also mobilize the commitments of the world through the Kunming Declaration. Thanks also go to Minister Guilbeault and the Government of Canada, and through them, the people of Canada, for so quickly coming on board and mobilizing all resources needed to make this happen. What you have accomplished is outstanding, and thank you very much. As we are gathering here in Montreal, Quebec, I would like equally to thank the province of Quebec for their hospitality and energy that they've brought to our meeting. Thanks go to the Mayor of Montreal, Valérie Plante, for her commitment to biodiversity and also for welcoming us all to this beautiful city. I would like to thank the people and the city of Montreal for their hospitality. As the world congregates at the heart of your city, you have the opportunity to show how you are a leader in building a new relationship with nature. 2022 marks the 30th anniversary of the signature of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Convention has inspired and promoted so much actions in support of life on Earth. While there is still much work to be done, there is much progress to be proud of. The Republic of Korea helped us organize and co-hosted the 30th anniversary of the convention in Montreal this past summer. Thank you for their support, much appreciated. I'm also so pleased to see so many countries and stakeholders represented in this room. The generosity of the donors has been essential, without which many would not have been here to participate and engage. In this regard, we would not have been able to organize even these meetings or support the participation of developing countries delegates and the indigenous community delegates and the youth without the generous contributions from a number of governments, including Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Czech Republic, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, including the Japan Biodiversity Fund, Korea, Malta, Monaco, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Slovak Republic, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Tourism Montreal, and the Institut de la Francophone pour le Développement Durable. From Kunming to now here in Montreal, this is the moment for biodiversity. The moment needs to mark the beginning of transformative change. It needs to include the ambition needed to ensure that we halt the loss of biodiversity. It needs to take the commitments we have heard for months and years and turn them into actions that will take us to 2050 vision of the convention, namely living in harmony with nature. Distinguished delegates, we know what success here looks like, an ambitious and achievable post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Your presence signals the world's commitment to the transparent, participatory, and inclusive process. We have over 1,800 registered participants, representing 193 countries. Clearly, the world is showing up for biodiversity. The last 4 years have been a collective journey to develop the new global biodiversity framework. There have been challenges, but there have also been progress. In the meeting of the open-ended working group that closed just a few days ago, both progress challenges were in full view. Our conversation takes place at an important point in the life of multilateralism, and the Secretary General Antonio Guterres underlined the stakes for global governance, our environment, are key. We often say in this convention and its two protocols that we need to work with nature and not against it. I hope that you will apply the same sentiments to your work by working together to find solutions for the challenging issues you will be addressing. Parties to the Access and Benefit Sharing Protocol and Biosafety Protocol families, you have grown and carried out important work over the biennium. Here at the fourth meeting of the parties to the two protocols, you will discuss key topics to advance implementation. Distinguished delegates, after the meeting of the working group, it is obvious that you all have much to say and are keen in ensuring that you find your voices in the final text of the new global biodiversity framework. I implore you to find your ideas and voices in the text that reflects consensus, compromise, and ambition. I urge you to be the chorus, a blend of the very best, rather than a group of solists, one crying to sing louder than the others. Listen to the sounds of biodiversity and be aware of the silence that will echo from the disappearance of the millions soon-to-be species of animals and plants across the globe. Listen to the voices of the 2.3 billion people in the world who are moderately or severely food insecure just last year. Hear the cries of the estimated 4 billion people who rely primarily on natural medicines for their health care. Not forgetting the noise of our global economy, which is dependent on ecosystems and the services they provide. These voices and sounds care less about synonymous words, commas, or semicolon. They care about action. In this way, keep sight of what the framework is meant to be and what the world needs it to be. The 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook opened with the words, and I quote, "Humanity stands at a crossroads with regards to the legacy it leaves to the future generations," end quote. And here in Montreal, the moment to take the right path is here. When you are negotiating and finalizing the goals and the targets of the framework, mobilization of resources, and all other decisions for the convention and its protocols, please keep our common goal in mind. This cannot be done without you. Every single one of you counts. Please give your all efforts to these next 2 weeks as we bring together this historical agreement framework and finally put our planet on a road to recovery. I will leave you with this thought as you head into discussions and negotiation. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And let us go together forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madame Marema. Every word of you is inspiring. On behalf of all of the parties, I'd like to thank you for your tireless efforts over the many months and in preparing for these meetings and for many other meetings. Now, we would now like to have the opportunity to listen to the statements of regional groups and from indigenous and local communities and major stockholder groups. All groups are encouraged to present consolidated statement covering the convention and the protocols. Due to the limited time, I will not invite statements from individual parties. However, parties who have prepared statement and wish to make it available may do so via meeting website. In order for us to be clear on the use of microphones, I will ask the Secretariat to provide some information on their use, as well as instruction for uploading statements to the website.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, distinguished delegates. It's a pleasure to see you all in person again. Firstly, just a note about COVID measures in place during this meeting. You will have been provided with test kits for the duration of the meeting. Please ensure that you test yourself prior to arrival on site each day and present the negative test upon entry. If you test positive, please advise the Secretariat at secretariat@cbd.int and do not come to the site until you are tested negative. Along with the test kits, you've been provided with masks. Please wear masks on site, except while eating and drinking and directly addressing the meeting. Off-site, kindly note that the Government of Quebec and public health officials recommend wearing of masks in all indoor public places. There are several cloakrooms to store your outerwear, but please note that any items that are not collected before midnight will be moved to the central cloakroom located on the ground floor. Please do not use the cloakroom for storing your valuables. Upon entrance to this meeting hall, you will have been provided a headset. Please be sure to return it on your way out at the end of the plenary. Regarding the use of microphones, if you wish to speak, please press the button in front of you once only. The green light will turn on and we will be notified of your request. Do not push the button twice. That would cancel the request. When it is your turn to speak, the President will invite you to speak, the light will turn red, and your microphone will be activated. Please remove your headset and start speaking close to the microphone, slowly and clearly, so that the interpreters can provide a clear translation. Some delegates from observer organizations are identified in our system only by a number. So if the President has not announced your organization name, please identify your organization at the beginning of your intervention. With regard to statements made in plenary, delegates are requested to upload them in advance using the online application on the meeting page. This greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters. Statements will be posted on the website after delivery if you have agreed to this when uploading the statement. In any case, please make sure that your statements are uploaded within 1 hour of the end of the session in which the intervention was made. And please be sure to include the name of your country or organization and the agenda item on the first page of the document. You can upload statements via the conference page. Click in Upload Statements tab. You will need to enter either your badge number or your priority passcode. It's also possible to access the facility via the Schedule tab. Please note that we don't use this function for contact groups when intervention should only be made in the room. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the information presented to the delegates. I now invite the regional groups to speak. Please make sure that you speak within the time limits, which is 5 minutes. First of all, I would like to invite the African representative Senegal to take the floor. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Senegal, in his capacity as acting chairman of the African Union, would like to deliver this statement on behalf of the African Group. Chair, it's a great pleasure and the culmination of many expectations on the part of Africa of the COP-15 and the two MOPs. We thank the Governor of Canada and China, the co-organisers of this meeting. Our gratitude also goes to the Executive Secretary and her team for the efforts put in place. Chair, Africa is convinced that COP-15 is a fruit of long-term preparation and a decisive moment for the biodiversity community in order to catch up with the objectives in the past few years. We are trying to put in place a vision of living in harmony with nature. We need measures that would cover the following elements. First of all, for ambitious actions for conservation and preservation of biodiversity, it is imperative to commit adequate financial resources and to create a global fund for biodiversity to the tune of $100 million a year. Secondly, the sharing of benefits arising from DNA sequences and multilateral mechanisms are the key elements of this initiative. Thirdly, the global framework should foresee provisions to build up capacity and transfer of technologies. Fourthly, the aspects linked to the integration, the follow-up, and the reporting are of imperative importance for putting in place legal and political intersectoral policies. We also fully support awareness raising on the matters relating to the protocols, in particular when it comes to the Cartagena Protocol. We are gratified of the recent steps taken, and Africa calls for decisive steps to make it operational. Also, no eligible countries have as yet been able to fully integrate biodiversity with their policies. So Africa calls for a special mechanism to help with putting in place the Nagoya Protocol. Africa is grateful to its partners who have supported several delegations, but at the same time we are deeply concerned with the weak representation of our continent at this meeting, which was partly due to the difficulty in getting visas. Despite of these challenges, Chair, Africa would like to reassure you of its full commitment to conduct constructive discussions during this conference. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to give the floor to Palau from the Asia-Pacific region. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Palau is giving this statement on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region. Our region expresses its sincere gratitude and appreciation to China as the presidency for COP-15, to Canada and its people for hosting the meeting here in Montreal, to the Executive Secretary and staff of the CBD Secretariat, and to all those who assisted in organizing and achieving this meeting. Mr. President, through this meeting, we aim to form effective, ambitious, pragmatic, and balanced targets for a post-2020 global biodiversity framework that addresses the urgency and need for coordinated action to fulfill the 3 objectives of the Convention. Our region is undeniably a source region with considerable biodiversity. In this regard, and in recognizing the diversity, vulnerability, and the economic situations of many of the countries in the region, the GBF must ensure that our collective ambitions are met with equally ambitious and effective means of implementation through resource mobilization, technology transfer, capacity building, and equitable sharing of benefits. Adequate means of implementation are indeed critical to tackle all the challenges faced and to ensure the effective implementation of the GBF. Therefore, we highly emphasize the need for adequate resource mobilization. Our region welcomes the funding for implementation of the GBF, including the Kunming Biodiversity Fund, Japan Biodiversity Fund, and the financial resources committed by the Government of Canada. We also urge parties to provide adequate, effective, transparent, and predictable financial support. We note that early revisions of NBSAPs with estimations of necessary resources, innovative finance to accelerate resource mobilization, and effective utilization of funds and other approaches were identified in a webinar hosted by Japan as important actions for implementation. The Asia-Pacific is home to communities and ecosystems with unique vulnerabilities with regard to biodiversity loss. There are more than 20 island developing nations. The preamble to the CBD Convention explicitly acknowledges the special conditions of small island developing states. Hence, there are special needs for capacity development and resourcing. We note the work undertaken by the Secretary on the Program of Work on Island Biodiversity. However, we emphasize on the need to directly address the means of implementation of the above-mentioned work and to consider the unique characteristics and vulnerability of SIDS. The Global Biodiversity Framework has the potential to fulfill all of our bold commitments to implement and deliver the necessary changes to improve global biodiversity during this decade and to meet the world's ambitious 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. As such, the GBF must be viewed as a whole package with goals, targets, and a monitoring framework that are coherent and aligned. However, we would like to highlight a few specific critical elements of the GBF. Half of our region is ocean. The Pacific Ocean holds a wealth of biodiversity and provides vital ecosystem services to innumerable people. And we need sufficient time for discussion of ocean issues. This includes Target 3, which aims to set ambition for adequate conservation and/or protection of biodiversity resources which are needed for terrestrial, island, coastal, and marine ecosystems. Relatedly, our work here and the work of the UNFCCC must be mutually reinforcing. We should work towards a GBF that minimizes the impacts of climate change on biodiversity and ensures mitigation and adaptation efforts avoid negative impacts on biodiversity. In respect for time, we emphasize concerns on other specific targets that are important to our region, such as Target 1 on spatial planning, Target 2 on restoration, Target 6 on invasive species, Target 7 on pollution, Target 14 on mainstreaming, Target 18 on subsidies, and Target 20 on knowledge. This is not an exhaustive list, nor is it meant to prejudge or preclude individual national positions. With regards to DSI, the AP region recognizes progress made on this topic, including those in Montreal in the past few days. The views in our region are diverse, but our members are keen to continue working to deliver an adequate solution for this topic. We all believe that workable solutions will be developed only through a progressive approach, ensuring an involvement of wide multi-stakeholders. Mr. President, the Asia-Pacific hosts most of the world's population, with countries ranging from large land masses to the smallest, from landlocked to big ocean states, and therefore we have many divergent views and perspectives. But as a region, we believe that this GBF is an important strategy that can set the world on the path to ensuring its survival, and are committed to work with other regions to shape the future of global biodiversity in the next couple of weeks. Finally, we hope for fruitful deliberations and discussions and a successful second part of the 15th Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam. I now give the floor to the representative from Latin America, the delegate from Costa Rica. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is made on behalf of the group of Latin America and the Caribbean countries. RULAC is a region that holds approximately 60% of global terrestrial life, very diverse freshwater marine species, and high endemism, with a wide diverse biocultural landscapes, seascapes, and multiple bird views that are crucial for local livelihoods. We welcome this relevant UN Biodiversity Conference. After almost 4 years since the initiation of this journey, we finally gathered here in Montreal for COP-15, CP-MOP-10, and CP-MOP-04. We take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat of the Convention of Biological Diversity for the work done to ensure that these sessions run smoothly. We will also to thank the People's Republic of China, Presidency of the COP-15, and the Canadian government for hosting us. At the outset of this UN Biodiversity Conference, we would like to share our vision for a successful COP. First of all, RULAC has come to Montreal with the expectation to adopt a post-2020 global biodiversity framework that will guide the world to decisively halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity, enhance ecosystem services, and advance towards sustainable development in its three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental. Second, a successful COP will deliver a global biodiversity framework with a strong means of implementation for developing countries and new, additional, and easily accessible financial resources in line with the Article 20 of the Convention of the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. If we want to bend the curve of biodiversity loss by 2030, actions need to start now. And for that, we need this COP to be remembered as the COP that changed the history of resources mobilization, capacity building, technology transfer, and technical and scientific cooperation, including North-South, South-South, and triangular international cooperation. The Latin American and the Caribbean region is well recognized as a global biodiversity hotspot and provides a variety of ecosystem functions and services for the world. This region constitutes different types of countries of unique biodiversity, including mega-diverse countries and the specific circumstances of seeds. Given the importance of our role in conserving and protecting the world's biodiversity and the different levels of the development, it is important that the countries of our region, in all their diversity, and afford the requisite financial and technical support in achieving the Convention's pillars. It is also important to recognize the needs of developing countries of our regions as per Article 20 of the Convention. Third, a successful COP will renew the arrangements for planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. The global biodiversity framework needs to be reflected in our NP-SAPs, and we need to track the progress of implementation at the global level, including the need for increased and sustained means of implementation. NP-SAPs and national reports should not constitute an additional burden on parties and allow for a rapid and effective implementation of GBF at all levels. Fourth, successful COP will adopt a global solution to share benefits arising out of the use of digital sequencing information on genetic resources and its derivatives. A global approach to shared benefits must be hybrid. It should include a multilateral component, such as the one envisaged in Article 10 of the Nagoya Protocol, and recognize that national arrangements related to ABS may over DSI. In addition, the solution should promote scientific research and innovation, as well as a fulfill commitments on capacity building, technology transfer, and technical and scientific cooperation. Fifth, a successful global biodiversity framework and COP decision must ensure that urgent action is taken to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, respecting the rights of the indigenous people and local communities, and ensuring human rights-based approach. I should also take into account the right of environmental human rights defenders, gender equality and gender-responsive approach, and ensure the empowerment of all women and girls, as well as in the youth engagement. The GBF should also recognize the multiple world views, including Mother Earth-centric actions. Dear colleagues, GRULAC has consistently been proactive in the negotiation and will continue to build consensus around common vision. GRULAC will continue working in a constructive way to advance the global biodiversity agenda and reach substantive results in future days. The Latin American and Caribbean group wish to reiterate our commitment to this COP, to the global biodiversity community, and to work hard in the upcoming days for global biodiversity framework that guide us towards the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now let's hear the statement from the EU representatives.
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to address this plenary on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is a traditional and unceded territory of the Canyon Kehaka, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. We express our appreciation to the government of the People's Republic of China as presidency of the 15th UN Biodiversity Conference, and thank the governments of Canada and Quebec and City of Montreal for warmly welcoming us to the second part of the conference. We would also like to offer heartfelt thanks to the co-chairs of the open-ended working group for their untiring efforts and guidance, and Secretariat of the CBD, the co-leads of the contact groups, and the members of the informal group for their hard work. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to our collective efforts, we now have a party-owned draft post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This draft provides a good basis for the final stage of our negotiations, aiming for an ambitious GBF. Now it is our job to change gear and bring an ambitious GBF over the finish line. This means ambition both in goals and targets, as well as in implementation. Effectively addressing both the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity loss worldwide requires measurable and time-bound goals and targets, intertwined with strong implementation mechanisms, including planning, monitoring, reporting, and review framework and the mobilization of resources. It is crucial that biodiversity is mainstreamed and the GBF implemented at all levels, galvanizing action by governments and throughout the UN system, within and across all levels and sectors, and all of society, including the private sector, aligning its activities to the GBF. European Union and its member states are ready to do their share to ensure that we will be successful. An ambitious GBF will require resources from all sources commensurate with the challenge we face. We have collectively delivered on existing commitments, successfully doubling our international public biodiversity finance and thereby surpassing the Hyderabad targets. We have contributed to a significant replenishment of the Global Environment Facility that will help implement the framework. These commitments will catalyze other sources of funding that will be required to reach our common ambition. We will continue to work on mobilizing international financial flows from all sources for developing countries. We remain committed to the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol and look forward to fruitful discussions at COP-MOP-10, which could contribute to greater effectiveness and improvements in the implementation of the protocol. We stress our willingness to continue discussions on relevant ABS-related topics, such as digital sequence information on genetic resources, and contribute to identifying a good way forward to address those pending issues. As regards the Cartagena Protocol, we continue to be committed to effective implementation of the protocol. We also welcome the new parties to Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol, and we look forward to continued cooperation with all parties concerning the effective implementation. As we call for halting and reversing biodiversity loss, we are deeply concerned that human conflicts are causing new and additional damage to the environment. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine, which grossly violates international law and is causing massive loss of life and injury, including to civilians. We remain in full solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. The war brings about pollution and long-term environmental degradation, destroying protected areas and natural habitats. While the war rages on, it blocks much-needed action on nature conservation and restoration. The EU reiterates its demand that the Russian Federation immediately ceases its military actions and is held to account. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is time to accelerate. The European Union and its member states stand ready to work with all parties, IPLCs, women, youth and other stakeholders to adopt an ambitious post-2020 GBF for the benefit of the planet and people. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, finally, I would like to invite the delegates representing Western Europe and other countries. I think it's a representative from JUSCANZ. Please, you have the floor.
New Zealand. New Zealand. Yeah. Microphone to New Zealand, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. New Zealand is making this statement on behalf of the JUSCANZ group of countries. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is unceded Indigenous lands, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange of views and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Our sincere thanks go to the governments of both China and Canada, to the government of Quebec, and to the Secretariat for the enormous efforts that have gone into holding this event in challenging circumstances. We would also like to sincerely thank the co-chairs of the open-ended working group. We are all very pleased to be at this point, where we can see that the adoption of an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework that will actually halt and reverse biodiversity loss is within our grasp. We did not anticipate when we launched this process in Sharm el-Sheikh that it would take 4 tough years to get to where we are. In those 4 years, the world has changed. The pandemic has had a profound impact. It has also reminded us of our inextricable relationship with the world around us. But there have been other changes. The widespread environmental destruction and transboundary harm caused by Russia's military aggression against Ukraine cannot go unnoted in this forum. We condemn these actions and their devastating impacts on the people of Ukraine. This is a violation of the prohibition of the use of force and the territorial integrity and political independence of Ukraine as enshrined in international law. We call once again on Russia to abide by its international obligations, cease all hostilities in Ukraine, withdraw its troops, and facilitate the rapid, safe, and unhindered access of humanitarian assistance to those in need in Ukraine. Mr. President, many of us attended the climate change meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh last month. The impacts of climate change over the past 4 years have become much more evident as we experience increasing extreme weather events and rising sea levels. We need to move from disagreements over words to action on the ground to ensure that our responses to climate change and biodiversity are mutually reinforcing. But it is clear that we still do have some differences to resolve over the next 2 weeks. As we said in Nairobi, we will need to do better at listening to each other. We will need to do better at finding common ground and solving the problems that our respective mandates have put in front of us. We need to be clear what the real differences are and not let minor wording or technical issues slow us down. We need a global biodiversity framework that will drive change, one that reflects our ambition to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, one that is supported by a strong planning, reporting and review mechanism and a clear set of headline indicators to ensure we track our global progress towards the global goals and targets. One that promotes synergies and cooperation between the different relevant conventions and processes. It should address the key drivers of biodiversity loss and include ambitious new efforts on nature positivity, halting extinctions, restoring degraded ecosystems, protecting and conserving 30% of the land and 30% of the ocean, and accelerating nature-based solutions as some of the most effective actions that we can take to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. It must be clear in its expected outcomes and be capable of being understood and used to better align and drive our collective cross-sectoral work to halt and reverse biodiversity loss, including how we organise the CBD's work over the next 8 years. The continued loss of biodiversity will not be reversed by using more words. We recognise that in order to achieve the above, adequate resources will need to be mobilised, capacity built, best practice shared. We will need to cooperate in new and creative ways to deepen the trust that already exists between us. We are committed to working with everyone in this room, including with Indigenous peoples, observers, and with stakeholders, in a manner that is collaborative, respectful, and innovative to achieve the outcome we all need. Thank you.
I would like to thank all the representatives from the regional groups. Now I would like to invite the chair of the Group of 77 plus China, His Excellency Ambassador Mulia Akram, to address the meeting. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Which country is that? Indonesia? Pakistan? Pakistan. Maybe he's not there.
Maybe we can change?
Yeah, Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Maybe he's not there. Okay, let's move to Antigua.
好，因为我们巴基斯坦的代表还没有联系上，所以我们下面转移到请安提瓜巴布达代表 小岛与发展中国家代表发言，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is being delivered on behalf of 38 small island developing states in the Caribbean, Pacific, Indian Ocean, and African regions. Mr. President, we would like to congratulate the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity on the arrangements made to organize this highly anticipated COP-15, NP-MOP-04, and CP-MOP-10. We would also like to extend gratitude to the People's Republic of China for its presidency and the Government of Canada for their gracious hosting of this meeting while we negotiate and work toward the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We would like to take this opportunity to underscore and make a strong statement on the special circumstances as it relates to small island developing states and their particular vulnerabilities regarding the devastating impacts the loss of biodiversity and the inextricable link to our livelihoods, economies, well-being, and cultural identities. This also impacts our ability to sustainably use and derive and share benefits from these resources in a manner that is beneficial to all. Mr. President, SIDS are on the forefront of the triple planetary crisis, with our biological resources being particularly at risk. Our island states are biodiversity hotspots with high levels of endemism. Approximately half of the animal extinctions recorded in the last 400 years were island species. It is scientifically known that the biodiversity of SIDS is particularly vulnerable. Our relatively small sizes make us particularly susceptible to the effects of biodiversity loss brought on by accelerated climate change, invasive alien species, land degradation, pollution, and overexploitation. Each year, the damage to our high-value ecosystems, which provide us with protection from natural disasters, food, shelter, medicine, connection to our spirituality, among other functions and services, becomes compounded, and every year it takes a Herculean effort from SIDS to recover and rebuild. Every year, we are concerned about the significant recession of our coastlines and the significant adverse impact on our marine and coastal biodiversity as a result of sea level rise, ocean acidification, and marine pollution. In 2021, the challenges faced by SIDS were further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And like the rest of the global community, we continue to build our resilience to respond to these external threats. On the way forward to reduce the impacts of the aforementioned threats and enhance conservation through research, monitoring, and educational campaigns, we would like to re-emphasize the multiple decisions on cooperations with other conventions, organizations, and processes, including promoting the thematic work programs on island biodiversity from 2010 and the mainstreaming of the Samoa pathway reflected in several COP decisions, namely Decision 213, Paragraph 4, Decision 321, Paragraph 3, Decision 415, Paragraphs 4 and 5, and Decision 824, and Decision 921. It is well known that SIDS are particularly
我们都知道，小岛与发展中国家呢，特别依赖于生物性的资源来支持我们的生计。因此呢，特殊的情况必须要在我们的公约的框架下得到我们的认识。我们呼吁各方呢，在本着妥协的精神，能够更加认识到我们目前所处的环境，特别是在这些生物多样性损失这种情况下，我们的生计呢取决于更好的，需要更好的一些机制，能够使得我们能够获得一些财务方面的支持和实施我们的这个国家的方案。我们生计呢取决于我们共同的一起合作和土著和地方社区。
support SIDS in our advocacy. Finally, Mr. President, the 38 SIDS present at this meeting will continue to work hard to ensure that the key outcome of this meeting is a framework that is effective, comprehensive, and applicable to all the parties and other stakeholders, and assert that this cannot be done without specific mention and consideration to our special circumstances. There is no shared future for all life on Earth without small island developing states. Thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to thank you. I'd like to give the floor to Mexico.
Mexico is speaking on behalf of 45 parties and one non-party drawn from all regions of the world. We would like to draw your attention to the joint statement, which for the sake of time, we will post online. This broad coalition of 46 countries commits to working together to ensure the adoption of an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. This statement, which we'll post online, outlines what this coalition considers to be the minimum elements of the package which we need to see adopted at this meeting here in Montreal. We hope that you will give it close attention and consideration. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next, I'd like to give the floor to the observers and the stakeholders groups. I would like to remind you that the time is limited to 4 minutes for each of the speakers. Due to the limited time, I will not invite statements from individual observers. However, if you have any prepared statement, you can upload it to our meeting website so that we can share it. We have already, Secretariat already told you how to upload those documents. I would like to ask the stakeholder representative to get ready. I'd like to now first give the floor to the IIFB. You have the floor. IIFB, you have the floor.
Microphone to IIFB, please. IPLCs. Microphone to IPLCs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I speak on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. We pay our respects to the Mohawk Indigenous peoples, the Haudenosaunee, on their traditional lands on which we stand. Our world is in a crisis, and we need to act now to ensure that species extinction and decline is halted and reversed. It is undisputed that Indigenous peoples and local communities, including IPLC women, are the most affected protectors of biodiversity, and that we continue to play important roles in meeting the objectives of the Convention. Our full and effective participation in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework rests on the recognition and protection of our rights and in ensuring that enabling conditions are in place. Participation of IPLC women must be ensured from an approach of equal and complementary relations between women and men based on our vision and culture. Our knowledge and contributions are essential across the framework. For this reason, it is crucial that references to human rights, especially IPLC rights, are reflected in key goals, targets, and sections. Section B, covering fundamental principles and approaches, needs concrete language on our collective rights. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, free, prior, and informed consent, other international human rights instruments, and our right to land, waters, and territories. We welcome the work done by Substa 24
and the Bonn expert meeting on indicators, particularly the inclusion of potential headline indicators on land tenure and on traditional occupations. Further work is required on indicators related to linguistic and cultural diversity, on full and equitable participation in environmental decision-making, indicators related to IPLC-led conservation, customary sustainable use, free, prior, and informed consent, community protocols, and direct funding for IPLCs are additional gaps. We reiterate the need for a clear COP-15 decision on increasing the amount of resources going directly to IPLCs. This will ensure that our actions that contribute to meeting the objectives of the Convention and the GBF are fully supported and resourced. The decision to convene an expert group on the institutional arrangements and new work program of Article 8J Working Group must be adopted. We need a solution to the issue of digital sequence information that ensures our rights to our traditional knowledge and to genetic resources on our lands, including FPIC, before our genetic sequences are deposited in databases. A global mechanism must incorporate our participation in its governance and provide substantial benefits for the custodians and stewards of biodiversity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to the delegate, to the Russian delegate, Russian Federation.
Уважаемый господин председатель.
Chair, colleagues, the Russian Federation has requested the floor to implement its right to reply in conjunction with the interventions of the European Union and JUSCANZ. We resolutely refute allegations against us as being outside the scope of this COP on biodiversity. We would like to reply to the statement about harming Ukraine's environment. Well, first of all, there's a selective approach at work. Over the past 25 years, about 10 conflicts have taken place, including Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, which led to serious damage to the environment of those countries. And the question of environmental damage, surprisingly, didn't arise. Now, Kyiv's environmental crimes are also something that the world community chose to ignore when in 2014 the supply of power and water was cut to the Crimea, when the how many dams Ukrainian forces have blown up. Over the years of its existence, the Convention on Biological Diversity has come to the fore as an authoritative, depoliticized platform to build up multilateral cooperation with a view to conserving biological diversity. We regret that a number of countries have opened a Pandora's box in politicizing environmental work. We have seen what such an approach can lead to at COP-14 of the Aarhus Convention, during which all of the forces, the brunt of the work, was not on matters within the scope of the Convention, but on developing an anti-Russian final document. Chair, when we hear statements of this kind, we wonder what is the purpose of these delegations at this conference, to develop mutually acceptable solutions to preserving the biodiversity through cooperation, or is their aim to destroy the biodiversity process, to attract attention to themselves, to politicize a process which is already complex? So it's hard to avoid the impression that these countries are deliberately trying to sabotage the adoption of the global framework and the budget. Our country sees the conservation of biodiversity as one of our priorities. We wouldn't want to see the politicizing of the convention arise as one of the obstacles in adopting efficient documents. Chair, would like to remind the colleagues of what we heard at the opening ceremony from the UN Secretary General yesterday, to the extent that we needed to adopt an ambitious framework program, and that could only be done through cooperation and through the search for mutually acceptable solutions or compromise. And so we are calling for a stop to the use of this platform for making anti-Russian statements, and we'd like to reiterate our degree to openly cooperate with all of the parties on matters related to this convention. I thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Ethiopia to take the floor on behalf of the mega biodiversity countries.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ethiopia speaks on behalf of the group of like-minded mega-diverse countries consisting of 20 member states. Our group expresses its sincere gratitude and appreciation to China as a presidency for the COP-15, to the government of Canada and its people for hosting the meeting, and the Secretariat of the CBD for its hard work to the COP-15. The like-minded mega-diverse country members want to acknowledge the effort made by the CBD parties and its Secretariat so far to arrive at the comprehensive, ambitious, and inclusive post-2020 biodiversity framework. We consider COP-15 to be humanity's and Mother Earth's last best chance to halt and reverse the current trend of the biodiversity loss globally, and recognize the need of a sense of urgency and solidarity to make the progress in further developing the GBF. We highlight that the main result of the COP-15 and the measure of its success must be a package, including decisions on the ambitious GBF, DSI, and resource mobilization, as these decisions reinforce and enable each other. The group recognizes that the proposed Target 3 of the post-2020 GBF allows for the flexibility and a broad set of tools for countries to use to contribute to its achievement, including supporting other ongoing conservation efforts in different multilateral fora, and ensuring that the sustainable use of these areas, if applicable, contribute to biodiversity conservation. We highlight that the invaluable importance of like-minded mega-diverse countries as a group to achieve ambitious and significant increase in conservation targets in terrestrial, coastal, and marine areas, as in the current proposed Target 3, and stress that the target will require significant financial and technical support to developing countries and flexibility on the measures for its implementation, subject to national capability and available financial resource. We stress the need to scientifically arrive at priority areas to ensure sustainable restoration at a natural baseline of the degraded terrestrial, inland waters, coastal areas, and marine is incorporated under Target 2 of the post-2020 GBF. We are convinced that all proposed targets in the GBF need to have a matching financial ambition that is clearly reflected in Target 19, and stressed that the increase by 10 billion USD per annum in international financial flow is proposed under Target 19 is far from adequate. We highlighted the AIDS replenishment of the CBD financial mechanism as a global environmental facility that preceded the GBF agreement. We welcome the increase of allocation for biodiversity, though recognizing that the need to mobilize new and additional funding to plug the financial gap for implementing the GBF in eligible countries. A solution would be to establish a supplementary global biodiversity fund as the earliest that attracts the necessary financial resource, as well as overcome the concern regarding accessibility of the fund, together with innovative implementation mechanism to accelerate implementation of the GEF, such as the payment for environmental services. I conclude by ensuring our commitment to contribute to the finalization and implementation of the GBF as agreed during the group meeting at Sharm el-Sheikh in 2018, and urge all parties to recognize the urgency of our task at this COP, and offer the required flexibility to achieve an ambitious framework so essential to the sustainability of our planet. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now have the honor to introduce and to you the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Stephen Gilbert, the hosting country, to deliver a speech. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President. I'm delighted to welcome you to my adopted home, Montreal, at this critical moment for nature. Allow me to first of all recognize with gratitude the Indigenous peoples and their territories where we have met today. Allow me also to recognize the historic nation of the Mohawk and Benaki peoples in the Greater Montreal region, where the Great Peace Treaty was signed so many years ago. We'd also like to recognize the Mohawk and Kanastake, Kanawage and Akwesasne nations and communities who continue to welcome and host us today with a habitual hospitality, and whose presence highlights the richness of Montreal's history.
Colleagues, Minister Wang, Minister of Ecology and Environment of China, Executive Director Inger Anderson from the United Nations Environmental Program, Executive Secretary Elizabeth Marima from the CBD, and my welcome to you all, delegates, observers, and other important partners in coming to these discussions with a spirit of seeking consensus on a way forward for nature and biodiversity.
I'm pleased that this global event is dedicated to the future of biodiversity, and that it is taking place now here in Canada. Health, resilience, and the sustainability of nature and of biodiversity are fundamental for our planet, for our cultural well-being, economic and spiritual well-being also. In simple terms, as said by the Secretary General yesterday, what we are doing to nature, we also do to ourselves. Nevertheless, the way in which we, the world community, currently live our lives is clearly out of step with nature.
It has been 3 years since the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services very clearly laid out the rapid ecosystem collapse happening around the world and identified the driving forces behind it. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework that we negotiate must address these drivers if it is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and put nature on a path to recovery. Climate change is one of these drivers and will become the leading cause of biodiversity loss by the end of the century. Our new global framework must commit to address these twin crises in tandem. It is also crucial that the framework we negotiate includes a commitment to conserve 30% of the world's land and oceans by 2030. Again, the science here is clear. 30% is the minimum necessary to address the biodiversity and climate crises. It's a floor, it's not a ceiling.
The world's largest countries geographically, such as Canada, are critical in this effort, and we are committed to play our part. There is no doubt that we cannot allow ourselves to continue the status quo. We need to be ambitious and to secure nature-positive solutions by adopting a global framework for biodiversity which is clear, ambitious, transformative and robust.
Aren't enough. We can't come away from these 2 weeks with an ambitious and transformative text, and it is my expectation that it will be. But unless we collectively turn those words into action and hold ourselves and each other accountable, those words won't mean much. Of course, ambitious goals need to be matched by real action. We need to mobilize resources to achieve our shared goals. This means accounting for, valuating, and financing nature in new ways from all sources, including governments, the private sector, philanthropy, and multilateral institutions. Just this morning, with the Prime Minister Trudeau, we announced a groundbreaking project with 4 different regions of Canada and Indigenous communities for projects for financing permanence of $800 million.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister Trudeau also announced that Canada would contribute to $350 million for developing countries to enable them to take action on biodiversity. This is added to the billions of dollars which Canada invests in nature via our financial commitments to the climate. By adopting a global framework for biodiversity which is ambitious in Montreal, we will bear out the ambitions of all, making it a reality. This obviously will involve a critical role for governments, but also working in close cooperation with civil society, the private sector, foundations, academia, and populations themselves. We must also work closer with Indigenous peoples, the original stewards of this land.
Nature and life on the planet are depending on us. I urge us all to work together in a way that reflects this urgency. Now is the time to adopt a landmark post-2020 global biodiversity framework that will unite us all in our efforts to halt biodiversity loss and set the world on a path to living in harmony with nature by 2050. The time is now. Montreal is the place. Together, we can do this. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. On behalf of the Presidency and all delegates, I would like to once again express to you our deep gratitude, and through you to Canada, the City of Quebec, City of Montreal, the Province Quebec, for your wonderful arrangements. You've put in place such arrangements to ensure that this meeting can be a success. I'm confident that with your support, our meeting will be successful. Thank you very much, sir, once again. And now I would like to invite the biodiversity-related convention representatives to take the floor. First of all, I would like to give the representative of CMS Convention. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, colleagues, I am pleased to speak on behalf of the executive leads of the 8 global biodiversity-related conventions, who together make up the Biodiversity Liaison Group. These are the CBD, the Convention on Migratory Species, CITES, the International Plant Protection Convention, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, the International Whaling Commission, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, and the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. Our conventions each have an essential role in the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and in effectively addressing the drivers of biodiversity loss. Together, we bring mandates and expertise that will directly contribute to the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including the conservation of migratory species and their habitats, regulation of international trade in wild plants and animals, science and stewardship of cetaceans, wide use and protection of wetlands, as well as natural and cultural sites of outstanding universal value for humanity, and ensuring genetic diversity and protection of plants at the heart of global agriculture. Our conventions also provide a means to deliver elements of the GBF that will require cooperation among parties at the regional, sub-regional, transboundary, and global levels. CBD parties have recognized the important role that the biodiversity-related conventions can play in implementing the GBF, first and foremost by including in its goals and targets and indicators many areas in which we have specialized mandates that directly speak to the GBF. Many of the COP-15 decisions also recognize the value of cooperation among our conventions, including for technical and scientific support, capacity building, planning, monitoring, reporting, and review, financial support for implementation, and awareness raising and outreach. Following COP-15, we will individually be identifying specific areas in which we can contribute to implementation and monitoring of the GBF in a meaningful and impactful manner to achieve more than the sum of our parts, including, for example, through joint programs of work. But the single most effective and powerful way to ensure synergies in implementing the GBF is to reflect the commitments and objectives of the various biodiversity-related conventions in parties' national biodiversity strategies and action plans. We would therefore like to stress the value of involving national focal points of the BLG conventions in the updating or alignment of NBSAPs and continuing to engage with our secretariats. Through the coherent implementation of the GBF, parties will maximize their work to reverse the loss of biodiversity and ensure sustainable development for all. We look forward to continuing our work together, both in the coming days and in the implementation of the GBF and other key decisions that will be adopted at this UN Biodiversity Conference. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I now give the floor to the representative of UN organizations. First of all, I would like to give the floor to the UN FAO. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. FAO wishes to thank the government of the People's Republic of China holding the presidency of COP-15 for its unremitting support, leadership and commitment, and the people and government of Canada and the citizens of Montreal for hosting the second part of the UN Biodiversity Conference. As stated by the Secretary General yesterday, we need nothing less than a bold global biodiversity framework to address the root causes of biodiversity loss, and we need to shift toward green solutions such as renewable energy, plastic reduction, nature-friendly food production, and sustainable resource extraction. Achieving this transformation requires collaboration and commitment by all of us. FAO, as a specialized agency leading international efforts to defeat hunger, will continue to strengthen its collaboration with the entire UN community and act through the common approach to integrating biodiversity and nature-based solutions for sustainable development into UN policy and program planning and delivery. Any solution to stop and reverse biodiversity loss will require agri-food system transformation. The framework will not succeed without the active engagement of the food and agricultural sectors. Food security and nutrition depend on biodiversity. To conclude, we are here at COP-15 alongside many UN organizations and agencies to provide any support needed for the finalization of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and we are committed to supporting the outcomes of the conference. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. I also have a representative speaking on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition, who is from the Philippines. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good noon to Your Excellencies, the parties and partners. This statement is delivered on behalf of the majority of the 123 members of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People and the Global Ocean Alliance. These coalitions were established to help achieve an ambitious deal at the 15th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in order to halt and reverse the severe trend of biodiversity loss and restore ecosystems that are critical to species and humanity's survival. The HAC has also promoted the integral role that biodiversity and climate nexus must play in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, recognizing that it will be impossible to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement without protecting and conserving nature. Meanwhile, the GOA champions the important role of the ocean to tackle the biodiversity and climate crisis. The central goal of the HAC and GOA is championing the protection and conservation of at least 30% of land and 30% of ocean globally by 2030, in line with scientific evidence. HAC and GOA members share a unified vision of the global 30 by 30 target as an essential element of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and believe that no deal at COP-15 will be a success without it. Nonetheless, while 30 by 30 is a crucial global target, we recognize that it's just one part of the extensive aims that make up the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, which must be understood as indivisible. We support ambitious actions for both the land and the ocean across the entire framework, and the need for clear and quantifiable goals and targets with an adequate and measurable set of indicators, increased public and private financing, and a robust implementation mechanism to put nature on a path to recovery by 2030. We also know that we cannot safeguard the world's remaining biodiversity without partnering with and respecting the rights and the traditional knowledge of the indigenous people and local communities, who often are the world's best stewards of nature. And this must be reflected in the 30 by 30 global target and the framework as a whole. During this COP, the parties have a moral and pragmatic imperative to come together and secure an ambitious and transformative agreement. We stand ready to engage with partners and parties to make sure we achieve a successful GBF that will pave our way for actions in the upcoming 7 years and beyond. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I thank you for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the women's organization. I give the floor to the representative of Foreign. You have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Amelia Arreguin from Mexico, speaking on behalf of the UNCBD Women's Caucus. after 4 years, coming all the way from Sharm el-Sheikh 2018. We would like to thank all the gender champions who have supported and built the momentum of hope. Hope for justice by tightly weaving women and girls' rights in the post-2020 GBF, particularly in Target 21 and 22, and the post-2020 Gender Plan of Actions. For all of you, we have brought again a flower to share our gratitude. Women and girls from the ocean to the tundra, on top of nurturing their families and communities, and despite the increasing negative impacts that biodiversity loss poses over them, on a daily basis, they keep shaping biodiversity by being its guardians, managers, users, and defenders. Today, for COP-15, these are our recommendations. Ensure a human rights-based approach, including the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and gender justice. Ensure gender responsiveness. It is one of the 13 principles set out for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework taken at COP-14 Decision 34, Annex 1, Para 2 AC. We welcome the post-2020 Gender Plan of Action and urge its full and effective implementation. Adopt a whole-of-society approach by recognizing the diverse biodiversity governance models and ensure women and girls' effective, equitable, and full participation at all levels of decision-making. Capacity building strategies should integrate different knowledge systems, be culturally appropriate, contextual, and gender responsive in their content and form. The success of technical and scientific cooperation and knowledge management lies in the inclusion of women's knowledge practices and innovations. Communication initiatives must challenge gender stereotypes and acknowledge women and girls' contribution to biodiversity conservation. Even more, partnerships with women's groups should be set up to reach the local levels effectively. Ensure that mainstreaming biodiversity policies and planning embed gender-just accountability and due diligence. Ensure that processes for monitoring, review, and reporting are gender-responsive and collect gender-disaggregated data. In summary, we have only one request for you today. Any decision resulting from COP-15 should not perpetuate gender inequalities, including gender-based violence linked to the environment. Rather, we encourage all parties to find a way, while conserving biodiversity, pursue gender equality. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to the local, subnational, and the local government representative. I give the floor to the representative of the province of Quebec.
Honorable Président, Chair, Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates. It's a great pleasure for me to address you on behalf of local and infranational governments coordinated by ICLE, Regions 4, and the government of Quebec. Permit me to extend my gratitude to the government of the Republic of China and the government of Canada for having taken up this challenge in a very short term. I'd like to take a few seconds on behalf of the government of Quebec in order to warmly welcome you here in Montreal, warmly despite the winter cold which is setting in. We have known for quite a long time, having started our negotiations on the global framework 4 years ago, that I'd like to permit me to quickly reiterate the most important demands. First of all, it's very important to integrate the role, explicitly, the role played by our local and international governments with a global framework.
We welcome the mention of international governments in Section B of the Global Framework, and we also hope that brackets could be rapidly removed. This mention would show our authorities that they have a role to play, that role has been officially recognized and enshrined in the Convention. We also welcome the work on Section B bis and the inclusion, the principle of the whole of government. Nevertheless, we'd like to add our footnote after the concept of whole of government in order to well define that concept within the Convention, for the purposes of the Convention. Thirdly, we are inviting parties to finalize the constructive discussions started in Geneva and to adopt the new plan of action of international governments, municipalities and local authorities in Decision 16B of COP-15. This new plan of action will provide the necessary framework in order to streamline this work along all levels of government. In that conjunction, I'd like to thank the Scots government for having initiated and supported the process under Declaration of Edinburgh, which has successfully mobilized international efforts during international negotiations. Friends, we have a historic responsibility incumbent on us. We have a role to play in adopting an ambitious global framework and to create the Montreal moment. We need to be ambitious, but at the same time flexible. Firm in our convictions, but also comprehensive and ready to listen to our colleagues and partners so that we avoid the Christmas tree effect, even though the festive season is at our door. We are counting on you, and you can count on us. Thank you, Chair.
I would like to thank you for your statement. Now we would like to invite the representatives from local networks. Now I would like to give the floor to the CBD Alliance. You have the floor. Now, I would like to give the floor to the African Wildlife Foundation. You have the floor. Please give the floor to the African Wildlife Foundation. He's sitting in the back. He's raising his hand. He's waving to us. Please wait a moment. We'll turn on your mic.
Among the NGOs, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speak on behalf of the CBD Alliance. The GBF must lead to rapid transformative change. Human rights must be an integral part of the goals and targets and cannot be relegated to Section B based on fundamental premises, a terminology that has no legal meaning in a section that is non-binding. Area-based conservation measures need effective management and gender-just, equitable governance to deliver the desired outcomes. FPIC, IPLC rights and sovereignty over their territories must be respected and diverse governance models recognized. Protected area models that exclude IPLCs are not acceptable. We welcome the agreement that was reached by the OEWG on self-standing targets on the rights of IPLCs and women. This needs to be reinforced by clear human rights indicators as part of the implementation mechanism and monitoring framework. The GBF must strengthen measures to tackle the drivers of biodiversity loss, particularly those related to the impacts of big businesses. To do this, governments must provide strong regulatory frameworks to control the activities of corporations and to make them liable for any infractions. Currently, the relevant targets are unacceptably vague. Terminology such as nature positive should not be included, as they are based upon unacceptable offsetting proposals. The annual flow of $4.6 trillion in perverse incentives that harm biodiversity must end. Otherwise, governments undermine their own biodiversity commitments. We need a strong, coherent implementation mechanism that addresses implementation gaps, reviews progress, and resolves challenges equitably, and the whole of government approach. We need to shift towards sustainable food systems, especially agroecology. We reject the current agribusiness models that involves risky biotechnologies, high inputs of pesticides and fertilizers, and threatens livelihoods, pollinators, soil, and fauna. A multilateral agreement on DSI is essential for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. The precautionary principle must be preserved by establishing mechanisms applicable to all parties for horizon scanning, technology assessments, and monitoring of new and emerging technologies such as synthetic biology and gene drives. Lastly, the people of the world can only live in harmony with nature if the CBD approves the GBF, which is based upon environmental integrity and is genuinely rights-based, gender-just, and equitable. Thank you, Mr. President.
I would like to thank you for your statement. Now I would like to invite youth representative to deliver a statement. 非常感谢
of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We acknowledge that we stand on the unceded land of the Kanien'kehá:ka people, a site that has served since time immemorial as a place of gathering and exchange among indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Delegates, we are finally here. The last step, the last chance to steer us towards transformation. Before we embark on it, let's take a deep breath. Let's take a moment to thank the land and the lives it nurtures. Dear delegates, our global network of young people has been working together with you for the past 12 years, mobilizing, building capacity, organizing, and listening. Listening to the voices of our community, to the voices of our generation and the ones that come after us, listening to the chirping, the bubbling of our fellow living beings, of our rivers, our oceans, our forests, listening to you. Listening very carefully with our ears, minds, and hearts, knowing full well all that is at stake. Dear delegates, we have gone past all limits of reason, all limits of greed, of loss. For too long, we have been fed the same greenwashing, the same broken promises, the same too little, too late solutions, the same old excuses, the same injustices. We see this in many places still in the global biodiversity framework. We remind you, if we keep doing things the same way, we are doomed to fail. We are urging all of you in power, decision makers that have the power to change people's lives with the brush of a pen or the push of a keyboard. We urge you to see the biodiversity crisis for what it is, a crisis that is rooted in injustice and inequality. Quick fixes, false solutions, empty slogans will not work. These are serving the interests of those who have brought destruction to our world at the expense of those who have nurtured and protected it since time immemorial. Selling us positive-sounding approaches that do nothing but maintain our dysfunctional status quo, this is not intergenerational solidarity. Until when will we offset our lands, seas, lives, and futures? Dear delegates, we understand the limits of your mandates and the differences that will have to be bridged during this time, but the things we share are more than what separates. At the opening of our youth summit 2 days ago, Kanyakehaga Elder Charles Patton from this land we stand on reminded us, it does not matter where you come from, this earth is still our mother. We repeat, it does not matter where you come from, this earth is still our mother. Let us celebrate this. Let us take a stand together. Let's make this framework express the heart, the goodwill that we know is in the people who have spent countless days on this. Let's work together to stop the same and usher in a new era of healing diversity, of people, of ideas, of culture, of nature. We hope this can guide us in the 2 weeks ahead of us, 2 weeks that will demand of us compromise, constructive dialogue, and real change for the benefit of present and future generations. No nature without justice. Stop the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
Joyce, I thank the representative from the youth community. I would like to thank the representative from the youth community. Thank you for your inspiring, lively speech. Thank you very much again. Now, distinguished delegates, we have quite a few speakers waiting, but unfortunately we don't have enough time to accommodate everybody because we have a long agenda to go through. So we discussed among ourselves. If you have not been able to speak today, we will try to arrange more time for you to speak later. But now we have to switch to organizational matters. Thank you for your understanding. Distinguished delegates, now we will take up agenda item 2 of COP-15 on organizational matter, as well as item 2 of the agenda of the meeting of the parties of the Cartagena Protocol and item 2 of the agenda of the meeting of the parties of the Nagoya Protocol. I would like to remind delegates that the agendas for these meetings were adopted at the first part of the meeting held in October 2021. Regarding the organization of work, in light of the need to use the time available as efficiently as possible, the Bureau has proposed some measures to improve the efficiency of our work. These are set out in document CBD COP-15/1/Ad4. I propose that the Conference of Parties decide to establish 2 working groups with the proposed allocation of work as contained in that specific document, bearing in mind that potential need for flexibility with regard to the timing of the deliberations. I also propose that the respective meetings of the parties of the Cartagena and the Nagoya protocols endorse these arrangements. Are there any objections? I see no objections, so the organization of work is thus approved. Distinguished delegates, in accordance with Rule 21 of the Rules of Procedure, in addition to the President, 10 Vice Presidents, 1 of whom acts as rapporteur, are to be elected from among the representatives of the parties present at the meeting. As we have noted already in the first part of the meetings, at its 14th meeting, 10 vice presidents were elected from the following countries for a term of office commencing upon the closure of its 14th meeting and the ending at the closure of its 15th meeting. And subsequently, 2 representatives were replaced by the parties concerned. Thus, the COP Bureau currently comprises, in addition to the President, Mr. Eric Okari from Ghana, Mr. Melasi Maryu from Ethiopia, Mr. Naresh Pargawa from India, Ms. Laina El Awadi from Kuwait, Ms. Teona Kachava from Georgia, Ms. Elvana Ramaj from Albania, Ms. Eugenia Aguidas Montezuma from Costa Rica, Ms. Helena Jeffrey Brown from Antigua and Barbuda, Ms. Gabrielle Obamaya from Australia, and Ms. Rosemary Patterson from New Zealand. All countries represented being parties to the Cartagena Protocol. The Bureau also serves as the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Protocol. In the case of the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol, the representatives of Georgia, Costa Rica, and New Zealand are substituted by the following persons. They are Mr. Dilovasho Dostov from Tajikistan, Mr. Joaquin Sharatsberg from Argentina, and Ms. Marie Harastad from Norway. I would like to remind all the representatives that I would wish to remind delegates that Ms. Elvana Ramaj of Albania was elected as a rapporteur during the first part of COP-15 in October 2021. Parties are also reminded that Mr. Eric Okori from Ghana was also nominated as the representative of the Bureau for the review of the credentials. Distinguished delegates, taking into account the principle of equitable geographical representation, the Bureau has recommended that Ms. Rosemary Patterson from New Zealand be elected as chair of Working Group 1, and Ms. Helena Jeffrey Brown from Antigua and Barbuda be elected as chair of Working Group 2. Can I take it that it is acceptable to the meeting? I see no objection. It is so decided. I congratulate the 2 chairs on their election and look forward to working with them closely over the coming days. Distinguished delegates, the present meeting is due to elect the officers who will take office at the closure of its 15th meeting and serve until the end of the 16th meeting. I urge all regional groups who have not yet submitted their nominations to do so by close of business day, Friday, December 9th, 2022. Early nominations will facilitate a smooth transition between outgoing and incoming Bureau members. I thank you for your cooperation. The Conference of the Parties will also elect other officers for various offices under the Convention and for each of the protocols, including chairs of the subsidiary bodies. As regards election of officers for the different offices, I would like to draw your attention to Decision 14/37, paragraph 28 of COP-14, and the corresponding decisions of COP-MOPs,
which confirms that with regard to contributions due from January 2005 onwards, parties whose contributions are in arrears for 2 years or more years will not be eligible to become a member of the Bureau of the Convention, its protocols, and the subsidiary bodies. So I'd like to remind regions to take this into consideration when identifying their nominees. Distinguished delegates, as you are aware, the current chairperson of the subsidiary body for science, technical, and technological advice, elected at COP-14 is Mr. Josiquil Benitez of Mexico. He will continue in office until the end of these meetings. In accordance with Rule 26 of the Rule of Procedure, the COP will elect at the present meeting a new sub-stat chair with a mandate until the end of COP-16. And from the end of COP-15. We will revert to this matter at our next plenary on December 10th, when I will call upon the Central and Eastern European region to nominate a candidate for the COP to consider. Distinguished delegates, as you know, the current chairperson of the subsidiary body for implementation, elected at COP-14, is Ms. Charlotta Sorquist of Sweden. She will continue in office until the end of these meetings. In accordance with the modus operandi of SBI, the COP will elect at the current meeting a new SBI chair with a mandate until the end of COP-16 and from the end of COP-15. According to the established regional rotation, it is expected that the chair would be elected from the Asia-Pacific region. We will revert to this matter at our next plenary on December 10th, when I will call upon the Asia-Pacific region to nominate a candidate so that the COP may consider the nomination. Thank you for your cooperation. Now I'd like to turn the floor to the credentials. Start discussion on the issue of credentials. I'll now invite you to turn to item 3 of the COP-15, item 3 of CP-MOP-10, and COP-04 agendas. In accordance with Rule 19 of Rules of Procedures, the Bureau shall examine the credentials of the delegations and report to the plenary. In this connection, I would like to remind delegates of Rule 18 of the Rules of Procedure, which provides that representatives shall submit their credentials no later than 24 hours after the opening of the meeting. In this regard, a notification from the Executive Secretary was sent to all parties on the 25th of July, 2022. So I therefore urge delegations that have not done so to submit their credentials as soon as possible and no later than tomorrow, which is 8th of December, by 10 a.m. to the Secretariat. I'd like to thank you in advance for your cooperation in this important matter. You'll recall that Bureau designated Mr. Eric Okori of Ghana as representative of the Bureau to report to the plenary on this matter. The report will be submitted to the plenary at its meeting on Saturday, December 10th. I also wish to note that in accordance with relevant rules of procedure and decision of COP, the Bureau has reviewed the list of observers admitted to this meeting, and the list can be found in Information Document number 2. I would now like to consider Agenda Item 5 under the Convention, date and venue of future meetings of the Conference of the Parties. In its decision 13/33, the Conference of Parties decided that at its 16th meeting, together with the 11th meeting of the party to the Cartagena Protocol and the 5th meeting of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol, would be held in Turkey. At our next plenary session, I will provide an opportunity for the representative of Turkey to update the meeting in this regard. According to the regional rotation established by COP, the 17th meeting of the Conference of Parties, as well as the 12th meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol and the 6th meeting of the party to the Nagoya Protocol, are expected to be hosted by one of the parties from the Central and Eastern European region. In that context, interested parties from that region are invited to notify the Secretariat on time. Regarding the periodicity of future meetings, the Conference of Parties will need to determine the dates of the 16th and future meetings on the basis of recommendations prepared by SBI. If Conference of Parties decides to continue to hold this meeting every 2 years, the 16th meeting will be held in the second half of 2024 and the 17th meeting in the second half of 2026. This is according to current progress and what we can tell. I will come back to this meeting at our next plenary session. Meanwhile, I will consult parties through the Bureau and prepare a draft decision for your consideration. I now turn to item 6 under the convention, item 4 under the Cartagena Protocol, and item 4 under the Nagoya Protocol on reports of the intersessional and regional preparatory meetings. During part 1 of the meetings, we heard the reports of, among other things, the ad hoc open-ended intersectional working group on Article 8J and related provisions of the Convention on Biodiversity. On its 11th meeting, CBD WG8J/11/7 and the subsidiary SUBSTA on its 23rd meeting. The document is CBD SUBSTA 23.9. As specified in the annotation to the agenda for the second part of the meeting, the following report will be presented at this meeting. 1. Report from the subsidiary body on scientific and technical and technological advice on its 24th meeting, CBD SUBSTA 24/12. Report of the subsidiary body on implementation on the 3rd meeting, CBD SBI/3/21. The third one is the report of the open-ended working group on post-2020 GBF on its 3rd meeting, CBD WG 2020/37, CBD WG 2020/4/4, CBD WG 2020/5. The reports on these meetings are before the meeting, Conference of Parties, and the respective protocols. I would now like to invite the chair of SUBSTA, Mr. Hezekiel Beniti, to provide a brief overview of the work of SUBSTA. Mexico, you have the floor.
Sorry, floor
Thank
to
you.
SUBSTA chair, please.
Yep. Thank you, Excellency Minister Wang, President of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to provide the Conference of the Parties with an update on the work of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice, SubSTA. Since the 14th meeting of the Conference of the Parties held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt in 2018, the SubSTA met twice. The 23rd meeting of SubSTA, which took place in November 2019 here in Montreal, Canada, was reported at the Part 1 of COP-15 in October 2021 in Kunming, China. Due to challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, several sessions, including several briefing webinars, special virtual sessions, and informal sessions of SubSTA 24 in July 2020 and February 21 were held ahead of the delayed formal meeting of SubSTA. Part 1 of SubSTA 24 was held virtually from 3 May to 9 June 2021, together with Part 1 of the third meeting of the subsidiary body on implementation, and Part 2 of the third meeting of the open-ended working group of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Perhaps due to the limitations of the virtual format, there was still a considerable amount of work remaining at the end of these sessions. At Part 2 of SubSTA 24 meeting, held in Geneva, Switzerland, from 14 to 27 March 2022, the SubSTA resumed its deliberations over 5 plenary sessions, 10 contact group meetings, 2 Friends of the Chair meetings, various informal consultations, and prepared 10 recommendations on the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, the proposed monitoring framework for post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the program of work of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IBES, synthetic biology, risk assessment and risk management, biodiversity and agriculture, biodiversity and health, invasive alien species, the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, and ecologically or biologically significant marine areas. Recommendations 24.2, 24.9, and 24.10 include requests for intersessional work to be conducted. In Recommendation 24.2, SubSTA requests a further scientific and technical review, which include an expert workshop on indicators which was conducted in Bonn from 29 June to 1st July, co-facilitated by Andrew Stotz from the UK and Alfred Otenje-Wap from Ghana. Annex 1 of the draft decision of the monitoring framework has been updated by the Secretariat in light of its intersessional work and can be found in the compilation of draft decisions in document CBD COP-15-2. In Recommendation 24.9 on conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity, and Recommendation 24.10 on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, SubSTA noted that work on these 2 issues were not complete due to the extraordinary circumstances prevailing. As such, SubSTA requests the Executive Secretary to facilitate consultations subject to the availability of financial resources among parties, other governments, and relevant stakeholders with a view to advancing discussions and sharing of views on these issues. Pursuant to this request, online discussion forums were convened on the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity in June 22, and on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas in September 22, respectively. These were co-facilitated by Hannes Hennicke from Germany and Marie-May Jeremy from Seychelles, Musungale, sorry. The reports of these online discussion forums are made available as information documents to inform deliberations of the Conference of the Parties on these issues. Mr. Chair, together Substa 23 and 24 have delivered a total of 17 draft decisions for consideration of this Conference of the Parties. Several recommendations still contain a considerable number of unresolved brackets, as they could not be resolved by the Substa despite its best efforts. I trust that the COP is now better informed by the Substa to continue its work and finalize a post-2020 global biodiversity framework and its scientifically, technically, and technologically sound as per mandate of the subsidiary body. Finally, I want to thank the CBD Secretariat for its support, the Substa Bureau members for its guidance, the co-chairs of the various contact groups, workshops, and fora, the COP Bureau and the Presidency for the leadership, as well as the co-chairs of the open-ended working group on post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and to my colleague, Ms. Charlotte Sarkis, Chair of SBI 3. I look forward to continue to work with all of you during the next 2 weeks, and I wish all delegates successful negotiations this month and for a defined path forward that leads us toward our common and shared vision, living in harmony with nature. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to thank Mr. Benitez. I'd like to, on behalf of all delegations, I would like to express our appreciation to you, to the Substa Bureau, and the Substa Bureau for your skillful leadership of Substa during its 23rd, 24th meeting, as well as important intersessional work. Under your guidance, Substa has prepared a large number of decisions for our consideration. Under the respective agenda, we count on your continued guidance during these meetings. I would like to invite the chair of SBI, Ms. Charlotte Sorquist, to provide a brief overview of the work of Substa. You have the floor.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to provide a brief report on the work of the subsidiary body on implementation. The report of the SBI on its third meeting has been made available to you in document CBD/SBI/3/21. A significant part of its mandate was to prepare recommendations to the COP on mechanisms that will support the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including resource mobilization, capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, gender, communications, mainstreaming, cooperation, and an enhanced planning, review, and reporting mechanism. It also addressed matters related to the Nagoya Protocol and the Cartagena Protocol. It has been a long road. During 2020, we held online webinars on most agenda items of SBI3. In September 2020, we held a special vertice session of SBI and Substa, where, among other things, we tested an online party-led open-ended forum for review. In December 2020, we held a joint Substa and SBI vertice session on biodiversity, One Health, and COVID-19. In January and February 2021, we held preparatory webinars on several SBI agenda items, and in March 2021, we held an informal vertice session of SBI, where most of SBI-3 agenda items had its first reading to prepare for the meeting of SBI-3. The first part of SBI-3 was held virtually from 3rd May to 13 June 2021, and allowed us to move forward, including in the preparation of conference room papers to be considered when we resume the meeting in person. The second part of SBI-3 was held in Geneva from 14th to 29th March 2022. The SBI succeeded in negotiation and adopting 90 recommendations, even if of course, there are considered many brackets that still need to be solved. But all those recommendations addressing all agenda items of this agenda as contained in report of this third meeting. The draft decisions contained in these recommendations are provided in the compilation of draft decisions for COP-15 in document CBD COP-15-2. In addition to preparing these draft decisions, SBI-3 requested a few elements of intersessional work in the areas of mainstreaming, technical and scientific cooperation, the financial mechanism, resource mobilization, and enhanced planning, reporting, and review mechanism. Concerning mainstreaming, in recommendation 15, SBI-3 requested the Executive Secretary to invite and compile views on the drafts of a long-term strategic approach to mainstreaming and its action plan. The result of that work is presented in information document INF 10, 11, and 12 to support agenda item 16A of this meeting. Concerning technical and scientific cooperation, in recommendation 3/8, SBI-3 requested the Secretary to commission a review of technical and scientific cooperation programs and to submit a report for consideration by COP-15. The result of that work is provided in document CBD/COP/15/12 that will assist the work of the COP under agenda item 13 of its agenda. Concerning the financial mechanism, in recommendation 3/7, SBI-3 requested the Executive Secretary to prepare the draft consolidated guidance to the GEF for consideration by the COP, incorporating several elements. This has been provided in the document CBD/COP/15/10, together with additional elements of the draft decisions that are integrated with those from the SBI-3 recommendation in the compilation of the draft decisions. In addition, the report of a GEF Council to the COP has been provided in CBD/COP/15/8. Concerning resource mobilization, in recommendation 3/6, SBI-3 mandated the co-chairs of SBI-3 contact group on resource mobilization and the financial mechanism to facilitate informal consultations on resource mobilization under my guidance and in consultation with the Bureau and the co-chairs of the open-ended worker group. The objective of these consultations was to enhance mutual understanding of the issues and expectation of parties and to explore opportunities for convergence. A first round of consultations was held prior to a fourth meeting of the open-ended working group and the preliminary report made available to that meeting. Some convergence had been achieved on how to address the successor to the strategy for resource mobilization, but other issues required further discussion. Therefore, a second round of informal consultation was held in October 2022. Based on these discussions, the co-chairs of the contact group identified a number of possible avenues towards mutually agreeable solutions of the key contentious issues and have been testing and refining these options through an iterative process with individual parties or smaller groups. The outcomes of these consultations will be reflected in the final report of the co-chairs of the contact group, which will be made available immediately. I wish to express my appreciation to the co-chairs of SBI-3 contact group and to all parties that engaged in that dialogue. While I anticipate further long discussions, it is my hope that these informal consultations will provide a good basis for the negotiations here at COP-15, both on the draft decision on resource mobilization and on relevant elements of a global biodiversity framework. Concerning enhanced planning, reporting and review mechanism, in recommendation 3/11, SBI-3 requested an extension to the peer review of the 4 annexes for the draft decision. Annex 1 on NP-MOP guidance, Annex 2 on guidance and template for national reporting, Annex 3 on non-state actor commitments, Annex 4 on the proposed modus operandi for an SBI open-ended forum. Accordingly, the peer review was extended and a workshop was held in Nairobi prior to a 4th meeting of the open-ended working group to provide an opportunity to share views and discuss the annexes. Based on the views expressed by parties at SBI 3 and in the peer review, as well as further analysis by the Secretariat, including, among other things, on how to minimize the reporting burden of countries when reporting on the relationship between national targets and the GBF, the Secretariat has prepared revised annexes that are appended to the draft decision for item 14 of the agenda contained in the compilation of draft decisions CBD/COP/15/2. Mr. President, throughout this process, I have worked closely with the COP President, the COP Bureau, the Chair of SAPSTA, the co-chairs of the open-ended working group, all the different contact group chairs, and all staff at the Secretariat. I would like to extend my thanks to each of them and my greatest thanks to all delegates from parties and observers for their tireless work over these past 4 years. Colleagues, it has been a long road, but now we are close to our final destination. I believe that together we have delivered a solid package that will enable a successful conclusion at this resumed session of COP-15. I remain ready to support the continuing negotiations in any way, and I look forward to the successful adoption of a GBF and its supporting mechanism, and most importantly, to start a collective implementation. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you, Madam Sokas. Speaking on behalf of all delegations, I would like to express our appreciation to you as the chair of SBI 3 for your skillful leadership of SBI, as well as during SBI has made a lot of decisions which provided a foundation for us to engage in discussions and considerations. We count on your continued guidance during this meeting we have now. I now give the floor to the co-chairs of the Open-Ended Working Group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework to report on the work of the working group in preparing the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I first of all give the floor to Mr. Francis Ogwa of Uganda and Basil Van Havre of Canada to report to us. You have the floor, gentlemen.
Floor to UN 1212, please.
Come this way.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, together with my co-chairs, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to provide the Conference of the Party with an update on the work of the Open-Ended Working Group on the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In line with the mandate under Decision 1434 and the guiding principle for the preparatory process, we are pleased to report that the working group has continued to make progress toward an ambitious and realistic post-2020 global biodiversity framework and to advance its work through a party-led process. At the first phase of the 15th Conference of the Parties of the CBD, we already provided a report on the first and second meeting, as well as part one of the third meeting of the working group. As such, we will focus today's report on the progress of the working group since then. In March 22, the working group met in Geneva for its first face-to-face meeting since 2 years earlier in February 2020 in Rome, Italy. The working group continued its works under 4 contact groups on the basis of the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework prepared by us, the co-chair, in July 2021. The meetings were intense, negotiation went late into the night, but parties were able to take ownership of the text of the draft framework. The meeting ended with a new draft of the framework that we have been referring to as the Geneva draft, which unfortunately was very long and contained many square brackets. Given that it would not have been practical for that draft of the framework to be sent to the COP for consideration with that many brackets, the COP Bureau members decided to convene a 4th meeting of the working group to give parties more time to advance the negotiation. In June 2022, the working group met in Nairobi for its 4th meeting. While the Nairobi negotiation led us to the clearing of 2 targets and 1 section of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the negotiation process continued to be difficult, and approximately 1,800 square brackets remain in the text. It was clear that the party needed more time, but also that the negotiation approach was not helping us making further progress. At that point, the decision was taken to convene a 5th meeting of the working group immediately ahead of this meeting of COP-15. This was to facilitate the work of the working group. The COP Bureau also established an informal group comprised of a small, regionally balanced group of negotiators and gave the group the mandate to meet in Montreal in September to work on streamlined text of the draft framework. In September 22, the informal group met here in Montreal over the course of 5 days. The group spent more than 60 hours to streamline the text, the draft framework, following 4th meeting of Nairobi. The informal group was able to shorten the Nairobi text by a quarter and reduce by half the number of brackets. As a result, the streamlined text was easier to read and the different options or points of divergence were more clearly visible. It is important to mention that the work of the informal group was informed by consultation with IPLC and experts on different value systems, as well as briefing by the chair of the contact group on the monitoring framework under Substar. The report of the informal group, which contained the streamlined draft of the framework, also provided a detailed rationale for the change proposed by the informal group to help parties understand the reasoning behind the change. Following the posting of the informal group report, regional briefings were held on the outcome of this work. Overall, parties were supportive and appreciative of the progress made. 2 general briefings open to all stakeholders were held as well. There was a strong support for use of the informal group streamlined text as a basis for the negotiation of the 5th meeting of the working group.
I'll now give the remaining part of our update. In the 5th and last meeting of the working group, which took place from 3rd to 5th December 2022 here in Montreal, in this same venue, the negotiation process continued under the same contact group structures as in Geneva and Nairobi. On the recommendation of the co-chairs, the informal group text was chosen by parties as the preferred basis of negotiation for most elements of the GBF. This approach was found helpful by many. However, some found it necessary to bring back elements from the Nairobi text. The working group was successful in mostly cleaning up 3 additional targets. Yet, when looking at the overall picture, the text grew in length and more brackets were added. Consequently, the level of progress is not what the co-chairs had expected. This means that a significant amount of work is left to be completed by COP-15.2. For us to deliver the framework at COP-15.2, parties will need to be flexible in reaching compromise. Parties should refrain from introducing new text or square brackets, but rather quickly resolve the many square brackets that we already have in the draft framework. Parties should brace themselves for long hours of negotiations. Nonetheless, we co-chairs stand ready to continue our support for parties and stakeholders in their effort to deliver and adopt an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the second phase of COP-15. Moving on to digital sequence information on genetic resources, the parties requested the working group to make recommendations to the Conference of the Parties at its 15th meeting on how to address digital sequence information on genetic resources in the context of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The working group addressed digital sequence information on genetic resources at its 3rd, 4th, and 5th meeting. At the 3rd meeting, the working group, my co-chair and I, and the executive secretary established an informal co-chairs advisory group on digital sequence information on genetic resources. This informal group met numerous times to discuss a variety of topics related to digital sequence information and as requested by the working group. At its 3rd, 4th, and 5th meeting, the working group adopted recommendations CBD/WG 2020/3/2, CBD/WG 2020/4/2, and CBD/WG 2020/5/2, respectively. In its recommendation CBD/WG/5/2, the working group recommended that the COP adopt a decision taking into account the draft text prepared by the working group. This includes a number of different policy options as contained in the annex to the draft decision. During the closing plenary of the 5th meeting of the working group, some parties made comments on the text of the draft decision, and these have been reflected in the report of the meeting. The Conference of the Parties is invited to consider the outcomes of the open-ended working group on how to address digital sequence information on genetic resources in the context of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This agenda item will be considered jointly with the corresponding item 14 on the agenda of the Conference of the Parties, serving as a meeting of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol on ABS. Thank you.
I would like to thank the 2 co-chairs on behalf of all the delegates and all the delegations. I would like to offer our deep gratitude to you both for your leadership and untiring efforts over the past 4 years. Under your guidance, the working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework has prepared a well-developed draft of the framework, as well as a draft decision on digital sequence information. These 2 matters will be taken up under Agenda Item 9 and 11, respectively. We look forward to drawing upon your wisdom and experience as we finalize these two key aspects of our agenda. Again, thank you very much. I would also like to invite the two co-chairs to continue to participate in the work of the Bureau and help promote the framework in its formation. Thank you very much again. Now, I would like to announce that the joint plenary is adjourned. Now let's review the report of the compliance committees. I would like to resume the meeting of the MOP-10 of the Cartagena Protocol. We now turn to item 5 of the MOP, report of the compliance committee. I would like to invite Mr. Rigobert Ntep, chair of the compliance committee under the Cartagena Protocol, to provide a report on this item. Now, Mr. Ntep, you have the floor.
Maroon, please.
Thank
you. Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As you will recall, at part 1 of the 10th meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol, I had the honor to present the report of the Compliance Committee, which is contained in document CBD/CP-MOP-10/2. As mentioned at the time, I will revert to the substance of the report at part 2 of the meetings to provide the necessary context to facilitate the consideration of the committee's recommendations. The report before you presents the summary of the work of the committee undertaken at its 16th and 17th meetings, as well as the recommendations that the committee wishes to submit to this 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. The recommendations are presented in the annex of the report and are also reflected in the compilation of draft decisions for this meeting. Mr. President, at the committee's 16th meeting in May 2019, the committee considered the outcome of the 9th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol, and welcomed the positive consideration of most of its recommendations by the meeting of the parties. It furthermore reviewed compliance on the basis of the information on the Biosafety Clearinghouse, general issues of compliance, and individual cases of non-compliance, and decided on follow-up actions. These follow-up actions have contributed to resolving a number of outstanding issues of non-compliance in relation to the completeness of the information on the BCH. Follow-up actions by the committee and the Secretariat resulted in the submission of the 3rd National Report by Montenegro, an issue previously brought to the attention of the meeting of the parties and referred to in paragraphs 15 and 18 of Decision CP-9/1. The committee, at its 16th meeting, also considered a number of compliance action plans submitted by parties that have not yet taken full or partial measures to implement their obligations under the protocol. At its 17th meeting in April 2020, the committee reviewed compliance with the obligation to submit national reports. It noted that 101 complete 4th national reports had been submitted to the Biosafety Clearinghouse and expressed its disappointment over this low number. It noted with concern that a number of the parties that had not submitted their fourth national report had also not submitted their third national report. The committee considered a number of possible factors that might have contributed to this situation, including delayed access to financial support, lack of dedicated human resources at the national level, as well as a lack of priority for and awareness of biosafety issues. The committee decided on follow-up actions on this matter, and in the year and a half since the committee's 17th meeting, 34 additional fourth national reports have been submitted to the Biosafety Clearinghouse. The committee furthermore noted that the early availability of financial support from the Global Environment Facility will be even more important if the synchronized reporting cycle for national reports under the Convention and the protocols will lead to an earlier submission deadline for the fifth national report. The committee, at its 17th meeting, also considered its input to the fourth assessment and review of the protocol and the final evaluation of the strategic plan, noting the considerable variation of progress on compliance with key obligations under the protocol. Finally, the committee considered general issues of compliance and individual cases of non-compliance. It considered an update on progress on the development of compliance action plans by certain parties and decided on follow-up with these parties. The committee recommended that the meeting of the parties urge parties to make voluntary funds available in support of parties that have developed a compliance action plan at the request of the committee, and to invite the JEF to support these parties in this regard. Mr. President, the regional groups have been invited to prepare for nomination of 10 members of the Compliance Committee who are expected to be elected by the MOP for a 4-year term each. The committee recommended that the meeting of the parties remind parties of Rule 2, Paragraph 4 of the Procedures and Mechanisms of Compliance, and urge them to ensure that members are elected on the understanding that they will serve a full 4-year term. Given the technical and legal nature of the work of the Compliance Committee, I would like to stress the importance that nominees have legal or technical expertise in the field of biosafety. Finally, Mr. President, despite the opportunities online means have provided for the committee to continue its work during the pandemic, the sentiment within the committee was that physical meetings provide a better opportunity to discuss the delicate matter of compliance, and in this light, I do express my hope that the committee will be able to resume its face-to-face meeting in the coming year. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ntip, for your report. Delegates are reminded that substantive matters arising from the report of the Compliance Committee will be referred to the working group for consideration. According to the notification that the Secretariat issued on September 1st, 2022, the term of 5 members of the committee, meaning 1 person per region, is proposed to be extended for 2 more years, while the term of 10 members, 2 from each region, and whose names are listed in the annex to the notification, would end by the end of this year. Therefore, COP-MOP of the Cartagena Protocol is expected to elect 10 members. Are there any objections to this proposal? I don't see any objections. The proposal is accepted. On December the 10th, we will elect the 10 members of the Compliance Committee accordingly. I therefore remind each region to identify 2 of their nominees from among the parties to the Credential Protocol. I now adjourn the meeting of MOP-10. I now resume the meeting of MOP-4 of the Nagoya Protocol. We will now take up item 5, report of the Compliance Committee. I would like to invite Ms. Betty Schroeder, Chair of the Compliance Committee under the Nagoya Protocol, to provide a report on this item. Ms. Schroeder, you have the floor. 主席先生，尊敬的代表们，女士们、先生们，我很高兴地代表名古屋议定书增约委员会的其他成员，以委员会
as chair to introduce the report of the committee, which can be found in document CBD/NP/MOP/4/2. You will recall that I took the floor at part 1 of this meeting to provide a brief overview of the work done by the committee. Now that the meeting of the parties will be able to consider the committee's recommendations, I would like to take this opportunity to bring some of the substance issues in the committee's report to your kind attention. At this third meeting held in April 2020, the committee considered different substantive matters, including the submission of interim national reports and a number of general issues of compliance, and made several recommendations to this fourth meeting of the parties to the protocol. The committee also provided input to the development of the format for the first national reports on implementation of this protocol. On the submission of interim national reports, I am pleased to inform you that a total of additional 11 interim national reports have been submitted since the third meeting of the parties to the protocol. This brings the reporting rate to 93%. I take this opportunity to urge the remaining 7 parties to submit their interim national reports without further delay. I also congratulate all parties and non-parties who submitted their reports, as this shows a strong commitment to the protocol and to keeping track of the status of implementation. We hope to see the same high rate of submission for the first national report under the protocol in the next cycle. On general issues of compliance, the committee requested the Executive Secretary to undertake a number of follow-up actions, including contacting parties to the protocol who had not yet published mandatory information in the Access and Benefit Sharing Clearinghouse. As a result, numerous countries published new national information in the ABS Clearinghouse, and many others provided information on their efforts to comply with the provisions of the protocol. It is encouraging to see the progress being made by parties to implement this instrument. Mr. President, the committee's recommendations to the meeting of the parties are reflected in the compilation of draft decisions, primarily in the draft decisions for this agenda item on the report of the Compliance Committee, but 2 recommendations have been reflected in the draft decision prepared for agenda item 10 on monitoring and reporting. Allow me to conclude, Mr. President, by thanking my fellow members of the Compliance Committee for their trust and collaboration during my term as chair, as well as their flexibility in adapting to working online. I also wish to congratulate in advance the members and observers who will be elected to serve the committee for the coming biennium. As you know, the committee plays an important role in promoting compliance with the protocol through cooperative means and information sharing. To make the most of this mechanism, I hope that the committee, along with its new members, will resume its work in a face-to-face setting in the coming biennium. I thank you very much.
好，非常感谢施罗德主席。2名成员的任期，拟再延长2年，而5名成员。
现在，According to the notification of the Secretariat issued on September 1st, 2022, the terms of the 10 members of the committee, 2 regions proposed to be extended for 2 more years, while the term of the 5 members, 1 from each region and whose name is listed in the annex to the notification, would end by the end of this year. Therefore, COP-MOP of the Nagoya Protocol is expected to elect 5 members to replace the outgoing members. And also, furthermore, the 2 observers from indigenous peoples and local communities are also to be elected. I see no objection. It is thus accepted. On December the 10th, we will elect the 5 members of the Compliance Committee accordingly. Therefore, I remind each region to identify 1 candidate from among the parties to the Nagoya Protocol. I now adjourn the meeting of MOP-4. The COP-10, MOP-4, and I will resume the joint plenary of COP-15, MOP-10, and MOP-4. I would now like to turn to Item 7 of COP-15, Item 6 of COP-MOP-10, and Item 6 of COP-MOP-4. Report of the Executive Secretary on the administration of the Convention and the protocols and on budgetary matters. The report proposes consideration and adoption of a budget for the program of work of the Convention and the protocol for the biennium 2023 to 2024. I invite you to consider the report of the Executive Secretary contained in document CBD/COP/15/7. I would like now to invite the Executive Secretary, Ms. Elizabeth Murema, to report on the activities of the Secretariat and introduce the proposed budget for the biennium 2023 to 2024. Ms. Murema, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Distinguished delegates, as you may be aware, COP-15 and the related meetings of the parties to the protocols had been rescheduled twice due to the COVID pandemic and the concomitant restrictions on travel. As the result, alternative arrangements were therefore needed to allow the continued operations of the Convention and the functioning of the Secretariat. In this regard, the parties approved on exceptional basis interim budget for 2021 and later for 2022. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the proposed budget for the program of work of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, and the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing for the biennium 2023-2024 in document CBD/COP/15/7, as well as the report on the income and budget performance on the convention and the 2 protocols for the biennium 2019 to 2020 and 2021 and 2022, all in document CBD/COP/15/6. The budget proposal submitted for your consideration presents 0 or zero real growth and zero nominal growth scenarios for the integrated program of work and budget for the period 2023-2024, each one net of the allocation for the extraordinary meetings for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The overall resources for the biennium 2023-2024 in zero real growth scenario amounts to about $40 million US dollars, reflecting a net increase of 8% compared with the approved budget, core budget for the biennium 2019 to 2020, less the provision of the extraordinary meetings of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And the zero nominal growth scenario presented amounts to about $37 million US dollars. Distinguished delegates, in Decision 14/37, paragraph 13, Conference of the Parties had requested me to analyze the structure and staffing of the Secretariat to ensure streamlined reporting arrangements, optimal functionality, and effectiveness in the implementation of the approved program of work for the biennium 2019-2020 in view of the expected post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework orientation of activities under the Convention. This preliminary analysis of the structure and staffing of the Secretariat in view of the orientation of activities under the Convention and its protocols, including the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, is contained in document CBD/COP-15/7/Add1. Since COP-14 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt in 2018, the Secretariat has, in response to Decision 14/37 and the subsequent audit recommendation by the Office of Internal Oversight Services, developed an initial results-based budgeting framework which has formed the basis of the proposed budget before you. However, resources will be required to further develop and institutionalize the framework, develop indicators of achievement, as well as fine-tuning baselines for monitoring and evaluation processes. Lastly, during the 4-year period since COP-14, the Secretariat has also been subjected to 3 audits. Among the key recommendations emanating from these audits is the mismatch between the Secretariat budget for its program of work and the increasing number of actions entrusted to the Secretariat as the result of an increasing amount of COP and COP-MOPs decisions taken at each of their meetings. Thank you, Mr. President.
好，非常感谢莫雷玛女士。根据惯例，现在请缔约方大会设立一个预算问题的接触组，任务是详细的审议2023到2024年的2年期的预算。
I'll read in English since the interpretation has finished, and I want to thank the interpreters for going over time. So the President thanked Ms. Marema for her speech and said, in accordance with established practice, I would like to now invite the Conference of the Parties to establish a contact group on budget with the mandate to consider in detail the proposed budget for the 2023 to 2024 biennium. After consultation with the Bureau, the President has requested Mr. Hamdallah Zedan of Egypt to chair this contact group. The contact group on budget, open to all parties, will meet at the invitation of the chair, and meetings will be advertised in advance in the daily calendar of meetings. The contact group is expected to have its first meeting tomorrow, Thursday, December the 8th. please always consult the convention's website for the latest information. And he has asked if this proposal is acceptable to the meetings.
请问大家是否有异议？如果没有异议的话，我们提议通过。尊敬的各位代表，会议开幕式到此结束，请各位代表注意，下次的全体会议将在12月10号星期六下午举行。会议将评估我们的进展情况，选举主席团和其他官员，并就任何已完成的议程项通过决定。今天下午3点，2个工作组就将开始工作。第一工作组在这个会议室开会，第2个工作组将在2楼的会议室开会。
So this concludes the formal opening of the meetings. Delegates are advised that the next plenary will take place in the afternoon of Saturday, December the 10th. To complete some of the opening statements, to take stock of our progress, elect the Bureau and other officers, and adopt any decisions on any completed agenda items. This afternoon, the 2 working groups will commence their work at 3 p.m. Working Group 1 will meet in this room, and Working Group 2 will meet in the room where the 5th session of the working group was held, that is, on the 2nd floor.
好，非常感谢秘书处。下面我宣布 COP-15、COP-MOP-10、COP-MOP-4 联席会议全体会议休会。谢谢。Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. English.
So the President has just closed the joint plenary meeting. I would just also like to remind all delegates to keep a close eye on the online schedule for all meetings. Also note that there are many side events and other events taking place now over lunch and at other times. You'll find details of these available on the website under the Associated Meetings tab. Also like to note that the final versions of the recommendations adopted at the 5th meeting of the working group are now available on the website. Thank you very much.
"在这里，我们的祖先祭祀天地，祈愿风调雨顺，谷物丰收。
The elegant Chinese characters were inspired by the beauty of life in nature. The The classical Book of Songs expresses the sincere feelings through describing various beings in the world. The Chinese civilization has always respected and loved nature and valued the harmony between man and nature. Giant pandas are a species from 8 million years ago. China has set up the Giant Panda National Park that covers 27,000 square kilometers of mountain forest. Nearly 2,000 wild pandas are living freely and producing here. Setting eco-red line, building national parks, establishing nature reserves, and keeping a distance from wild species reflect people's willingness to restrain their own behavior and to give way to wild species. The germplasm resource banks and gene banks around the country hold the survival code of millions of species, protecting the valuable assets for humankind. Forest conservation and the holistic conservation and restoration of mountain, river, forest, farmland, lake, grassland, and desert ecosystems are bringing back lucid waters, lush mountains, blue sky, and white clouds.
"像保护眼睛一样保护自然和生态环境。这个理念在中国深入人心。在这里，曾经灭绝的麋鹿不但恢复了种群数量，还被成批野化放归大自然。
Thanks to the unremitting efforts by China, many extinct or endangered wild species are regaining confidence and dignity. The elevation of Yunnan varies from 70 meters to 6,700 meters. It's a kingdom of animals and plants. People's efforts to protect biological diversity is speeding up at the moment. China is taking actions to accomplish the mission. Human beings have put forward a proposal to protect the biological diversity and to build a shared future for all life on Earth.
在这里，有一只胸怀世界的小鸟。每年秋季，小小的北京雨燕开始迁飞，一路穿越37个国家，最终抵达南非高原。
For them, the Earth is a whole. The countries they fly across are all homes. No matter they are big or small, powerful or weak, rich or poor. Humans are to coexist harmoniously with nature and all things on Earth. China will work together with the world to protect this planet we call home.